In the aftermath of the historic flooding in the Northeast, we now find out that at least 46 individuals have died in the flooding, far more than we knew about yesterday when we talked about it on the show. And we're reading now this morning that Joe Manchin is very concerned that you might be influenced by all these climate disasters to take climate change seriously, and he's not going to have it. So he has posted an op-ed with the Wall Street Journal saying he's ready for a pause now on all this infrastructure stuff, saying a pause is warranted because it will provide more clarity on the trajectory of the pandemic, and it will allow us to determine whether inflation is transitory or not. While some have suggested this reconciliation legislation must be passed now, I believe that making budgetary decisions under artificial political deadlines never leads to good policy or sound decisions. I have always said if I can't explain it, I can't vote for it, and I can't explain why my Democratic colleagues are rushing to spend $3.5 trillion. Well, he can't and doesn't explain any individual problem he has with the reconciliation bill, any of the spending other than the overall number, which we'll return to. Now, one would think he'd be able to explain that since the details have been available for months and months and months, and he's a goddamn senator with a crew that could ask questions of the people putting this together. Apparently, he's chosen not to do that. He's busy writing op-eds. He goes on to say, I, for one, won't support a $3.5 trillion bill or anywhere near that level of additional spending without greater clarity about why Congress chooses to ignore the serious effects inflation and debt have on existing government programs. Now, look, at the very least, he's been consistent on one thing. $3.5 trillion is way too much. From the very beginning, he's been calling, for instance, for up to $4 trillion in infrastructure spending. So that's weird. Nobody seems to remember that that's what he was. It would have played if we brought up the graphic. But anyway, so he's been calling for $4 trillion. When Biden initially said how much he wanted, Manchin tried to claim, no, actually he wants nothing. I'm the one who has this big goals and everything. He got a good bit of press out of that. And then ever since then, he's been running from it. And now I guess because we spent a couple of weeks not talking about Joe Manchin, Brett, all of a sudden he's got to try to throw a spanner into the works, and maybe we'll get an infrastructure bill again, and maybe we won't. Maybe he just wants us to interview him. Maybe he wants to add something to the bill. God only knows, but he's the president, so he gets whatever he wants.
Yeah, Joe Manchin is so infuriating because for these reasons, some which you mentioned, he has every opportunity to find out exactly what his colleagues are talking about. And his colleagues have been talking about it for a very long time. Rushing is not what's happening here. There is no rushing. And if he calls it an arbitrary political deadline, it's like, what are you talking about? There's an election coming up. And in the election's always coming up. When you look back on the Affordable Care Act, there was a very tiny window, and everyone criticizes how long it took them to get that done. Because things won't happen unless there's a deadline. And his artificial political deadline is until then. His artificial political number is now 3.5 trillion, as it was reported by whoever this is. It looks like insider. Senator Joe Manchin calls for up to $4 trillion in infrastructure spending. That's what he did. $4 trillion. He said it before. Is he lumping that in with the the 1.8 or whatever it was $1 trillion spending package that was the bipartisan one?
Well, but that's even smaller now. I mean, it's not that much more.
It's $538 million in additional spending. I think it was that. So
it's almost exactly $4 trillion.
So if he goes in there, the thing with Joe Manchin, at the end of the day, he does this kind of thing to do some kind of personal branding back in West Virginia, and then frequently votes along with what people want him to vote on. And so if he does this, stomps and screams, but in his specific fake folksy West Virginia way, which is I might be about to pass out as he does this, which makes it even more infuriating. And then he just shaves $35 million off of this, or $1 billion off of this, and we go home. Everybody signs off on it, and his final number is $4 trillion. Fine, Joe Manchin. But what are you doing in the meantime? If you can't explain it, find a way to explain it. That's the other Joe Manchin thing. Is he knows that line works back home. If I can't explain it, I won't vote for it. That's the destination. It's not doing stuff that helps West Virginians. It's maintaining his own personal brand so he can keep getting elected. And then maybe when this is all said and done, and people have gotten infuriated with him rightly to the point where he's like, I'm not going to do this anymore. He stops being a senator and he goes to be a governor.
Yeah, maybe. Look, maybe we never know. You're 100% right. Sometimes he does end up doing what we would want him to do, and sometimes he doesn't. And the financial stakes and the climate stakes and the infrastructure stakes are so high that I don't want to just gamble. It would be cool if there was some pushback. I mean, there is some. We're gonna give you from progressives. I haven't heard anything from Biden yet. Maybe they're talking behind closed doors. That's one strategy. The former president tended to be a bit more public about it. Feel like the fact that Manchin is apparently saying, "Oh yeah, Biden, all your plans that you've been talking about, no, I'm single-handedly going to stop those." Feels like the president could respond to that in a public way, because right now, like maybe he does it behind closed doors, and maybe it even works. But there's no public cost to being willing to say, "I'm going to tank my entire party's agenda." There's no cost to that. He just does it. He gets coverage. Basically, nobody that the powerful care about is going to criticize him. It's frustrating. So look, sorry, what were you going to say?
I forget. Yeah. AOC has the best take on this, and I see that you have it. So
yes. Okay. So why don't we go into that? Well, first of all, the communications director for Sunrise Movement, Ellen Scalise, says she responded with just abolish the Senate. That was the entirety of her thing. Yeah. Look, it fundamentally changed the Senate. The country is not split 50-50. So why is the Senate 50-50, leaving a goon like him to be able to determine if anything happens or not, based on whether he feels like it or not?
I'd say reestablish the Senate. Reborn, like whatever it is. What are they called? Born again Senate. Let's do a born again Senate.
Yeah.
Where we go back to the original way the Senate was set up, where you don't have a filibuster. Like you don't
still have popular election of senators.
And you'd still have popular election of Senate. No, you couldn't have that. It would still be the state legislature. So it's a 1917, 1817 hybrid. Let's do that. 1917, 1817 hybrid of those two.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to give you the response of some others, including Jamal Bowman, who said, "Hey Joe, these are the homes in my district after last night's storm. How much destruction do we need to see before it's worth investing in our climate?" I don't know. Look, my dumb, naive, knee-jerk reaction is, well, he's not seeing it in West Virginia. But then I realized I don't think he'd care. They blow the tops off mountains in West Virginia. I don't think he cares about environmental devastation even close to home. And why am I referring to West Virginia as his home, as if he ever goes there, as if he gives a damn about anything that happens in that state? But anyway, Jamal Bowman is right. A lot of people just lost their lives. By the way, AOC pointed out on Twitter that the subway stations and other infrastructure that was rebuilt post Hurricane Sandy, that was designed to be more resilient to flooding like this, a cause exacerbated by climate change, didn't fail in the same way. It was the older, non-upgraded infrastructure that was more likely to fail. Again, pointing out not only that we need to deal with climate change, but infrastructure is an integral part of it.
Yeah, there's this, she's explaining it to him. He wants the answers. Thanks for the question. Let's explain it to him.
Yeah.
So there just needs to be a quick explainer of what's going on. And the explainer will be the text of this budget. And he's gonna say, I can't read it, it's so long. Well, then someone give him a bullet by bullet explanation of what's in it. And those are the exact things. And also, these kinds of investments in energy will still power West Virginia workers. Yeah. And these kinds of infrastructure investments are the things that get to exactly keeping those people in employment. Yeah. It'll fund systems that put them to work.
Yeah.
It worked before, it will work again.
Let's give a little bit more from AOC. Maybe that'll put me in a better mood. She says, and by the way, and I try to point out when she does specifically call out, and she loves calling out Joe Manchin in particular, says Manchin has weekly huddles with Exxon and is one of many senators who gives lobbyists their pen to write so-called bipartisan fossil fuel bills. It's killing people, our people, at least 12 last night, sick of this bipartisan corruption that masquerades as clear-eyed moderation. And she points out that they can hit the cancel button on this so-called bipartisan charade of an Exxon lobbyist drafted infrastructure bill unless we actually pass a law that helps people's lives with healthcare expansion, childcare, climate action, etc. Pointing out that this does go both ways. The progressives can kill both bills too. Although I will point out again, as I have from the very beginning, it is not exactly equal because one side cares way, way more if anything ever happens. Joe Manchin's not gonna cry himself to sleep in his mansion if they don't get the bipartisan bill in addition to the reconciliation one. So again, it's asymmetric warfare.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.